Some betrayals break you, and then there are the ones that remake you. Most people, when they think of a broken engagement, imagine a man, a wife, a late-night confession, maybe a found text message or a lipstick that wasn't yours on a collar that was. But for Naomi Chen, the worst betrayal didn't come from her fiancé. It came from her little sister, the girl she had read bedtime stories to, the girl she had defended in school hallways, lied to cover for at family dinners, and stayed up late talking to her through every heartbreak. Her sister. And what Claire did didn't just cost Naomi a wedding. It was supposed to cost her everything. The company, the future, the name. Supposed to. What happened next is a story about what a woman is truly capable of when she stops crying and starts thinking. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what Naomi had built. She wasn't just successful. She was the kind of successful that looks effortless from the outside. The kind that only happens when someone has been grinding quietly, invisibly for years. Naomi Chen was 28 years old. She had graduated at the top of her class from one of the most prestigious business schools in the country. She had spent 6 years working beside her father, Henry Chen, learning the company he had built from the ground up with nothing but a business plan, a loan, and a belief that he could outwork anyone in any room. Chen Capital managed over $2 billion in assets. And Naomi was 3 months away from being named its chief financial officer. She had a sleek apartment she designed herself. A wardrobe that quietly said she didn't need to prove anything while somehow proving everything. A reputation among colleagues as someone who was always 3 steps ahead. And she had Marcus Reed. Marcus was an architect. Steady. Warm. The kind of man who remembered the small things. What coffee you ordered when you were stressed, which song made you ugly cry, the exact way you liked to be held after a hard day. He had proposed on a Tuesday evening, which Naomi always found funny because Tuesdays are the most ordinary days. And somehow that made it feel more real. Not a grand gesture. Just a man on an ordinary Tuesday, deciding she was the person he wanted forever with. She had said yes before he finished asking. For a moment, Naomi Chen had everything. And then her father got sick. Henry Chen was diagnosed with a cardiac condition in the fall. He declined faster than anyone expected. By winter he was gone. And in the grief of those months, in the fog of funeral arrangements and legal filings and the devastating loneliness of losing a parent, Naomi was not watching the people closest to her. She should have been. Claire Chen was 3 years younger than Naomi and had always lived in a different category of family affection. Where Naomi was praised for discipline, Claire was adored for charm. Where Naomi worked, Claire dazzled. Their mother, Eleanor, never hid her preference. Not cruelly, but in the quiet ways mothers sometimes do. She softened every edge for the younger child while letting the older one grow sharp against the world's resistance. Claire had grown up understanding one thing deeply. She was loved best when she was winning. And winning for Claire had always meant having what Naomi had. The best internship. The corner seat at family dinners. Their father's attention. And now apparently Naomi's fiancé. The text came from a number Naomi didn't recognize. No message. Just a photo. She opened it at her office desk on a Wednesday evening. The room was empty. The building was mostly dark. And the photo showed Marcus and Claire in a restaurant Naomi had never been to. Clothes in a way that had no innocent explanation. Naomi didn't scream. She didn't call Marcus. She didn't call Claire. She forwarded the photo to her own email, deleted the text, and finished the financial report she had been working on. It took her 4 more hours. She didn't make a single error. When she got home that night, Marcus was in the kitchen making pasta, her favorite, with that easy smile that now looked like a costume. She said 4 words. "I know about Claire." In the silence that followed, in the way his hands stilled on the counter, in the 3 seconds before he turned around, she got her confirmation. He had been seeing Claire for 3 months. 3 months. Which meant it had started almost exactly when Naomi was sitting beside her father's hospital bed. She didn't cry. Not then. She picked up her keys and left. The door closed softly behind her. Later she would think that the softness of that door was the first decision she made. Not a slam. Not a scene. Just a quiet click. A woman choosing, in that moment, exactly who she was going to be from here. The next morning, Naomi went to her mother's house. Claire was already there. Of course she was. Claire had arrived first. Told her version first. Framed the story first. By the time Naomi walked through the door, Eleanor had already decided how she felt about the situation. Her mother said things like hearts don't follow rules. No one wanted to hurt you. And most devastatingly, she held Claire's hand while saying them. Naomi stood in her childhood living room and looked at her mother comforting the woman who had been sleeping with her fiancé. And she understood something she had probably known for 20 years but had never fully allowed herself to believe. Her mother had never been on her side. Not once. Not during the school politics she navigated alone. Not during the years she put into the company, while Claire was praised simply for showing up. Not now. Naomi didn't yell. She didn't break down. She looked at them both and said something none of them would forget. "Don't mistake my composure for weakness." Then she left. Behind her, Claire watched her go. And for one unguarded second, her expression changed. The grief vanished. What was underneath wasn't guilt. It was a calculation. 2 weeks later, Naomi was called to a meeting with the family's estate attorney. She expected routine paperwork. Instead, the attorney placed an envelope on the table. On the front, in her father's handwriting, were 6 words. For Naomi only. When the time is right. The instructions were clear. The envelope was to be given to Naomi only if she was no longer engaged to Marcus Reed. Her father had suspected something. Inside the letter, Henry Chen explained the truth about Chen Capital. The company had been officially split 3 ways in the will, between Naomi, Claire, and Eleanor. But 7 years earlier he had created something else. The Chen Legacy Trust. The trust held a 51% controlling interest in Chen Capital. Majority control. And the sole trustee was Naomi. It had always been Naomi. Henry Chen had built it that way because he knew both of his daughters. He loved Claire. But he knew her. And he knew the company he had spent 30 years building needed someone steady to protect it. Naomi sat in her car in the parking lot for 1 hour after reading the letter. Then she drove to the office. Because when your father hands you a sword, you learn how to use it. Claire and Marcus soon became public. They appeared at events together. Posted carefully curated photos online. Claire framed the story perfectly. 2 people who hadn't planned this but couldn't fight their feelings. Love as fate. Not betrayal. If Naomi had been someone else, it might have worked. But Claire made one mistake. She brought Marcus into the boardroom. At the next board meeting, she proposed bringing him in as a strategic consultant to the company. Every head turned toward Naomi. Naomi stood calmly, opened a folder and slid documents across the table. The Chen Legacy Trust. Controlling interest, 51%. Trustee, Naomi Chen. Any proposal required trustee approval. and Naomi did not approve. The meeting ended. From that moment, everyone in the room understood something. The quietest person there was also the most powerful. But Naomi knew majority control wasn't enough. Claire still owned 24% of the company. Enough to cause damage. Enough to create uncertainty. So Naomi made one call. Victor Ashford, a wealthy investor who had tried to partner with Chen Capital for years. They met once. 40 minutes. Naomi offered him 12% equity with aligned voting rights with the trust. Victor asked 3 questions. Then he said Henry Chen would be proud. And he took the deal. With Victor's stake aligned, Naomi now controlled over 60% of the company. Claire's 24% no longer mattered. But Claire wasn't finished. She hired lawyers and challenged the trust, claiming their father lacked mental capacity when it was created. It was a long shot, but it created headlines. Investors asked questions. Competitors began making offers to senior staff. Claire had created just enough instability to shake confidence. So Naomi responded. At the emergency shareholders meeting, Claire's lawyer presented the argument. Naomi waited until he finished. Then she submitted affidavits from 3 physicians who had evaluated Henry Chen at the time the trust was established. All confirmed he had been fully competent. Then Naomi revealed something else. The trust had exercised its right to buy back 8% of shares Claire had quietly sold over the past year. The trust now held 59%. With Victor's 12% aligned, Naomi controlled 71% of Chen Capital. The challenge was over before it truly began. The room fell silent. Claire looked at Naomi across the table. And for the first time she stopped pretending. "You were always his favorite," she said quietly. "I just wanted to be chosen." Naomi looked at her sister for a long moment. Then she answered softly, "I know. But you chose the wrong way to fight for it." She stood and addressed the board. She announced her assumption of the CEO role of Chen Capital, effective immediately. Then she adjourned the meeting and walked out. Marcus and Claire married 8 months later. Naomi wasn't invited. He sent a gift anyway. Crystal glasses. Her mother eventually came to Naomi's first investor gala as CEO. She stood at the edge of the room watching her daughter command the space. Afterward, she found Naomi in a quiet corridor and said something she had never said before. "Your father would be proud." Naomi thanked her. And she meant it. People sometimes ask if she is bitter. She says no. Grief is for the irreplaceable. And none of what she lost was irreplaceable. She lost a man who was never fully hers. She lost a version of her sister that may never have existed. But in return, she discovered exactly what she was made of. Some women fall apart when the life they built collapses. Naomi Chen did something else. He built a better one.